full session. Yes, I see Rebecca, you are recording, so thank you very much. You heard me saying something about the session. And you were right that the recording starts exactly at the time we needed to start. Thank you.
Sorry for interrupting. Yeah, I'll be around for the first 15 minutes or so. So shout if you need anything, but otherwise, good luck. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
So Moran, having just looked at the time zones.
Yes.
Okay, it's great for Dan. It's terrible for you.
Terrible
if I
for
am
me.
the only non-presenter, I am happy to watch the recording of the previous session. And
Well,
we could
I can
finish
suggest,
early.
Andrew, that we, if you don't mind, and if the recording is not very important as a recording, we can drop the session part and go directly to demos and questions and kind of have a laid back talk about software heritage, about infrastructure for software. We had a nice demonstration on the previous before the repeat session by Lars and Søren, and I know that maybe Dan, you have some questions about this integration between Invenio RDM and software heritage. So maybe we can do it in a more like I'm going to maybe stop the screen share, or I can screen share, and I can.
We have Tom Honeyman joining us. Good.
Hey Tom, it's been a while. It's because of the Fair for Research Software activities that are coming to play. How are you? Well, you need to be to know that we are recording, so everything that's said now, even though we are more of a relaxed small session, it's still recorded.
Right. So Rebecca, can you make Moran a co-host so she can? I guess that's okay. Sorry.
I am a co-host.
You are okay.
I am a
Yeah,
co-host.
You're not listed as a co-host under participants.
Am I not?
No.
For some reason, I am. Yeah.
Because I told Rebecca to put you as co-host.
Okay, now you are.
Okay, there we go.
There we go.
Good.
So basically, 75% of the meeting are co-hosts now.
Right.
You can be a co-host too, Andrew, if you want.
No, it's fine. I'm not worthy. I know this.
Oh, really? I think that you should. You are. So let me not do a presentation. Let me still get through some of the slides to get to the demonstration part, which is the interesting part in this session. So, as I said, we are recording, and I'm going to. I think that Julia has linked the notes in the document. So there are notes, and in the notes there will be an activity. And I think that even if we are just the 5 of us, we can be very efficient in activity doing. And so let me continue this agenda for today, where we will not meet the software source code interest group, because you all here know the software source code interest group, but discover these exciting new infrastructures that are now proposing features for research software. And I think that it would be interesting to have this discussion, maybe even more so that we are a small group. So before moving to the next slide, just to let you know that I was about to share and demonstrate software heritage, and I can continue proposing that, and sharing the Invenio RDM video by Lars, then sharing mod video about Episciences and HAL, and finally the AskDemo Math demo on a registry of mathematical software. And the activity was about adoption. So let's get strategies on how to get these features and infrastructure adopted. As we are a small group, I'm not going to let you meet the software source code interest group, because most of you are chairs, our past chairs of this group, or the other working groups that were outcomes from the software source code interest group. it's still a forum to discuss software. I think it's very important to keep a forum like that in RDA. I do want to see more working groups on software, and I'm kind of saddened to see that there are less working groups than before, but there's still some good work done in RDA for software, because what can we say about data if we don't have the software? I'm going to skip that slide, but we can just say that I'm glad we're having this as an ongoing place for people to join to discuss research software. I'm going to skip most of that because it's already recorded in the other session, in the first session, and most of you have already seen this slide. But I will say that we are here to make software first-class output, and we're doing that in different ways. Today, for this session, I'm going to show how we will make a difference by making it possible. And these features and infrastructure are developed through an European project called FAIRCore for EOSC, changing a base layer so that the other layers here in the Nosec pyramid for culture change can actually follow. Now, I said that, but I'm going to tell you that Neil really loves the cycle transformation of the pyramid, which I understand, because these are elements that they do kind of evolve over time, and it's a cycle. If you change one thing, then it will apply on another layer. But I prefer the pyramid because I do feel like without the base layer of the making it possible with the infrastructure, we cannot do the changes upwards. And so the icebreaker question that I see that all of you are already on the check-in document was to say who you are or write who you are, even though I know you all, and where you come from and what brings you here and what's your kind of weather. It's raining here in France, in Paris. It's nighttime, so I added a moon. And I see it's kind of sunny on your side of the world. Oh, foggy, Andrew. Okay, foggy and sunny.
Yeah, but I don't see a fog emoji, so I'm having to resort to text. I feel bad.
Maybe maybe the one with the wind would be a kind of a fog.
Yeah, but it's completely still, so that doesn't work either. Anyway.
Yeah.
It'll be sunny. It'll be sunny later.
I was looking for a sunset, but I couldn't find that one. So.
Sunset. I think there is a sunset in the emojis for weather. I can look it up later on. Okay.
Probably not necessary.
Well, it's kind of an icebreaker activity I use in different workshops, so I can put it on the next one. Okay. Maybe since we are a small group, you want to share why are you here, what brings you here, and not just write it in the document. Who wants to go first, or should we just move on? As you wish. We are a cozy group.
I can see everybody focused on their typing right now.
It's only because I'm typing, okay? I can't do both at once.
I'm sorry.
I was being smart because I'm no longer in a role that is where I have to say the phrase recognition of research software as a first-class output of research. I'm changing it to remove the phrase first class and go with primary, which was always something that Dan pulled me up on.
What? Heresy.
Yep.
Primary. Okay. That's interesting.
I'm no longer contractually obligated to say that phrase, so I can put it whatever way I like.
But don't you like it, the phrase, now that
Well, I think Dan was right in saying that first class kind of has connotative things that we don't necessarily want to associate with it.
Right,
I-
that I've just edited my response.
Oh, well, you're going back to the company line, are you? Or-
No,
I'm-
I've formatted your name as strike through.
Ah.
Okay.
Passive aggressive formatting.
Fine. Yeah.
Excellent. I think that we are making progress because maybe it's also a word that we should use more, the word primary. And maybe we need to change the how we think things, not as first or secondary or primary or secondary, but
Equal.
well, it's a complex system where we need every part of the puzzle. So we need to make sure that some parts that are very important are not neglected.
Yeah,
Yes.
so if I could just speak in briefly in defense of the words that I apparently made Tom say like a sock puppet for years when he didn't believe them.
No.
I think-
I got gradually turned off those words, and Dan was
Sure.
one of the people that pointed it out.
Okay, so I guess what I was trying to get at with that was, I don't know, maybe it's positive discrimination, although that's problematic. Anyway, I think I was trying to say that there are many different kinds of outputs from research. And for a very, very long time, we privileged publications. And it took us a long time to recognize, hey, the data is important in its own right, rather than just as a means to getting a graph or a table. And I was trying to come up with some wording that said, and now we recognize the software's there as well. So maybe if you're pinning me to pinning me down, I would say that publications and data and software are different, clearly, but equal, or should be at least equal. And maybe we just need to come up with a way of saying that.
Thank you, Andrew. I see that Dan has his hand raised. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I guess I was going to make a couple of different points because we have a little bit of time, so I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
So one is there is some issue kind of in a diversity, equity, inclusion sense with using first class, because it implies some people are more privileged than others, or some things are more
Yeah.
privileged than others, and so that's, I think that's the sensitivity about it a little bit. I'm not actually completely sure that saying primary instead of first class is actually much different. So I don't know if that really helps or not a little bit. Maybe it does a little bit. I was reading something yesterday about the term rule of thumb, which apparently some people are objecting to because they believe that it comes from a time when a man was allowed to whip his wife with a stick as long as the stick wasn't larger in diameter than,
Oh,
which turns out I don't believe is actually true, but it's kind of a perception that's being passed around. And so,
yeah.
right, so sometimes words get some association connotation that doesn't necessarily come from anywhere, but it may happen. But I was going to say, I think that the thing that Tom's word or Andrew's words that he's forcing through Tom's mouth that I actually would object to more is actually output. So I think that output isn't, in general, isn't the right thing. Isn't the way that I would prefer to think about software, but more
Agreed.
as a part of research, not just an output of research. But from the point of view of RDA, where there is kind of a focus on outputs, maybe it is the right word in this context.
Very interesting. Yeah, go
Hold
ahead,
on,
Tom.
Andrew. I had my hand up before you.
Yes.
No,
it
no, you
just
did,
disappeared.
and I was going to cede to you, Tom. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. I put primary down in a rush. I must say it's still a fairly unbaked thought, but especially with my change in role, I'm increasingly thinking about the difference as recognized in IP law between creative works and quote unquote mere data. So software and data actually enjoy different legal statuses. Data, at least in Australia, is kind of in a gray zone with respect to having protection from copyright. And the ones where it's sort of clearer are where there is serious intellectual input into doing that. And another avenue, and it doesn't cover off every piece of software that's produced under research, is to really think of it as intellectual or knowledge building. And I quite like that avenue as well, because we tend to privilege the written word as like a true intellectual work. But as we all know, writing software is not the same as turning on a camera and taking photos or capturing numbers in a spreadsheet. It's creative. Yes, it's methodical, and it applies sort of principles, but it is also a creative output. And really, world-changing software is deeply intellectual in its own right, more often than not as well. And that's another way in which I think software is often dismissed, because people don't appreciate the effort that goes into making it. Is actually it is all those things. It's not just a byproduct, if you like, of research. So that's and that, by the way, happens to gel with the space that I'm in now, where a lot of researchers also do other forms of creative output or creative work, and don't get recognition for it in academia as well. And that is the zone sometimes called non-traditional research outputs, of which there is a lot of stuff that is creative in nature as well. So that's the other kind of place that I'm thinking of, now that I no longer have to carry Andrew's line. But to me, software's always been like that. And I think that's one of the great things about software.
Thank you, Tom. That was very, very interesting to follow. And I agree with the creative part, absolutely. And I see that, Andrew, you want to
So I don't want to
that.
completely derail your session, Moran, but I think this is an interesting discussion,
Of course.
and maybe one that Dan and I can continue in September. I don't know, face to face. So a couple of comments. Firstly, on Dan's reaction to the word outputs, I agree that software is part of the research process, but like a publication and like data, it's also a discrete thing that can be seen as a result or a byproduct, I think was the phrase that Tom just used, of the research process. So yes, it's embedded within the research, but it has a life of its own. It can be pointed to, it can be reused, it can be cited. So maybe output isn't the right word, but I think we need something that recognizes its status as an outcome of the research as well as an enabler for the research. And then the second comment I wanted to make was responding to Tom, where he said, we privilege the written word. Well, I don't know how Tom writes software, but when I write software, I write. It's written. It's just a different form of writing. In fact, I would argue it's probably a more intellectually rich form of writing, because nobody tries to compile their journal articles and gets a syntax error. Maybe they should, who knows? But software is actually a more rigorous form of writing. And so for that reason, I think we absolutely, it's an activity and it's a process. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But I think for that reason, we absolutely should be thinking about how do we, maybe thinking about Dan's DEI comment, maybe privilege is the wrong word too, but elevate, I don't know, something that doesn't, some word that suggests this isn't just a passive this isn't just an enabling thing that you do along the way to the real research output. It's actually a thing that has value in its own right. All right, I'll shut up and let Dan.
Thank you, Andrew. Dan, I'm going to give you 1 minute and then I'm going to continue the session. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
So I was going to say partly what Tom said, that I think there is actually a significant difference between software and papers, at least, in that the paper kind of is an exclamation point at the end of a research activity, and then another research activity can continue, but you don't start with that paper and then change it, where you do with software often. So I think software actually is much more continuous than papers are, and I think that leads to differences, and that's kind of the process I think that Tom was talking about. I was also just thinking that maybe rather than thinking about first class or privileged or something else, we should think about equitable. So maybe it's that research software is equitable in the research process with other forms of research work.
I think that you have made a very good introduction to my next slide, which is the research software lifecycle, where I've taken this figure from a recently published report on the research software lifecycle. And the infrastructure that we will see today are really looking into the publication and dissemination part of this cycle, but this cycle is very complex and software is very complex. And I think that this is very difficult to share with people who do not know software as well as people who develop software. So when we do talk about this question of output or not an output, of first class or not first class, I think we need to understand that software is mainly created outside of research. And when we do think of research, the research software lifecycle, it does contain a lot of steps that are not seen when we do disseminate it and publish the software. Okay, so I'm going to move to this one where we do see how much it's not really, where the research software is really the very top of this software stack. And research software is just a thin layer. And we do depend on many other layers when we want to get software sustainable and reusable and interoperable, all these fair words. So when we look at Konrad Hinson's software collapse diagram here, you can see that I've kind of took a line, a blue line for the scholarly infrastructure that can cater for research software. A blue with dotted lines, we can also think that scientific infrastructure can also be catered by scholarly infrastructure, but that's not so sure. And the Universal Source Code Archive, Software Heritage, since I didn't introduce myself, Software Heritage is to collect, preserve, and share all the software publicly available. We do have this mission that can encapsulate all of these layers. I'm going to continue because we have the demos ready to show you, and I think that this will be the part that you are most interested in. The things that are at stake is to archive, to have the software accessible, to retrieve it, reference, so we can identify each software artifact specifically, describe software so it can be discoverable, and absolutely necessary to give credit to the authors, because this is a big incentive when it comes to disseminate and sharing the software. Now, in 2020, the European Open Science Cloud has published a report, a Scholarly Infrastructure for Research Software report, where 4 pillars were shared: archive, reference, describe, and cite, as I said before, what's at stake. And best practices and recommendation was also shared on how this ecosystem should be catering research software. And you can identify here on this slide the different scholarly infrastructures that are kind of dependent one on another, the aggregators on the publishers and the scholarly repositories, and all can be connected to this Universal Software Archive, which also caters other software which is not in the scholarly ecosystem. And in FAIR Co4IOS, we are actually implementing this vision of the scholarly infrastructure for research software report with 6 different infrastructures, and the demos are only for 3 of these infrastructures. And you have also OpenAIRE in the FAIR Co4IOS project, and you have also Dagstuhl and an instance by Dance of Dataverse. Now, should I run through this diagram. I don't know if I should, because I don't know if you know this diagram here in the call, but I will run through the diagram. This is the actual kind of main scenario when a researcher is developing software in a Forge with other colleagues, a team, maybe teams in the research team, maybe contributors that are outside the team, but all of that happens in a public Forge. Then this researcher wants to disseminate the research and want to submit and want to archive the software, so that he does archive it with a safe code now and submits the SWID to this infrastructure. It can be one of those that we will see later on, but it can also be any infrastructure that connects to software heritage. And it can have also a moderation or a curation process happening on the metadata that is being deposited. And so this is the demo part. Before I'm going to go to the demo, since we are a small group, and I didn't ask Dan yet, but this is open for you, Tom, and for you, Andrew, and for Julia as well. If you would like to be testers of these new features and infrastructures that we are currently working on in FAIR Call for IOSC, this is the time to say, I want to test those features. So in the document that you have in the lost my window. After checking in, there's a table there with a lot of links, but after that there's another table where you can volunteer and help us give your opinion. What does it mean? This, if you volunteer, I will send an email and then we will discuss how you can test and which one to test, because 6 components is a lot of components. I don't expect one person to test all components, right? And now I'm going to move to the demos, unless you have any questions about what I've said earlier or any comments, because you have.
I do, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Yes. It's better.
The APIs are intended for infrastructure to infrastructure
Yes.
connections. So
Yes.
you're not intending for people to test this infrastructure in the sense of, because I have an activity that we call the Community Data Lab, where we have people who are leveraging APIs to introduce an extra layer of functionality to people who want to access archives. And none of these APIs are of the kind where, for instance, they could interrogate software heritage holdings to draw out stuff that's not available through the conventional interface, right? These are really about interconnects.
So the testing is actually testing the platforms that are connecting to software heritage. So it's not testing the API endpoints in terms of, it's not as a tester, you're not an infrastructure, you are an end user using an infrastructure that is now connected to software heritage. That's the loop. You can also be an infrastructure that wants to connect to software heritage, and then we will be very happy and we'll discuss further how to do and move forward with this plan. But in this setting where I am looking for testers, it's actually the end users. So these end user can be researchers that are depositing software or putting metadata records about software, their software, or curators that are wanting, have some experience about curation of metadata for software. There are some metadata views that can be tested as well. Yes.
What you're calling Invenio RDM,
yes.
to most people would be recognized
Zenodo.
as Zenodo. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'll sign up. Yep. For
Okay,
Zenodo.
good.
Yep.
Good to have you to sign up. Maybe I should start with Lars's demo before going into my demo of software heritage, because the next few slides are demos with videos. First one was about software heritage. Second is because we are not there yet. It's about Invenio RDM, which is the engine behind Zenodo. They passed the entire system to the Invenio RDM tool last year. So that's actually very new that they are all based on the Invenio RDM system. And the demo is the Invenio RDM staging, kind of test bed. And then we have Epsciences and HAL, and finally the registry for mathematical software. So it's very different infrastructure. Let me, instead of showing you the video of Software Heritage, I'm going to share a little bit about Software Heritage. Even if you know Software Heritage, I know you all do, you're very good students here. But maybe it will be more fun to kind of not just do the demo, but get like live questions. So the first thing I'm showing is our Save Code Now feature, which is the Wayback Machine for software source code, where you can just so easily save any code now. And here, I don't know if you see it in the Zoom, but there's a few different types of origins. What we call origin is actually the repository URL that you can choose, and then you submit a request. I'm going to go directly to the save requests that are now being processed. You can see all the submitted requests and their status. Some will have a pending status, and there's some that have a status that is it's not rejected. Well, it can be rejected because if you put a URL that is not or a 404 or a URL of something that's not software, that will be rejected. We have a moderation view for our own team to accept URLs that are kind of bizarre URLs. Usually with GitHub and GitLab, it's automatic. The archival is not going to a manual creation of the URL. That's the Save Code Now. Now, a new feature, for those of you who are not familiar with this new feature, is the Add Forge Now. So if you have an institutional forge, you want to submit all the repositories in this institutional forge, right? So you don't want to have listed one by one. So we have this new functionality, well, rather new. It's a maybe 1 year old functionality, but I still say it's new because it's kind of new, where you put the forge type and then the forge URL, the forge contact name and email, because we do need to contact them to tell them that we're going to maybe do a lot of requests in a very short time. So to make sure that's not a problem in a system. Yes. So yes, it is an institutional forge ingest. And for your question, Tom, I see it in the chat. How do you sort software submissions from non-software? Well, we go to the link and see if that's software. So it's not, there's no automatic tool saying, oh, that will probably be software or not. So it's if there are a lot of links that are not from whitelisted forgers, we have this manual human going to check it and say that's fine. Yes. Any questions or comments or things that they want to see on Software Heritage? I didn't show the suite, they didn't show anything, but if you have any kind of live questions, go ahead, Tom.
I'm always interested in the new features, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the institutional forge,
Yes.
is that an ongoing linkage? So once you register your institutional forge, there's have you thought about the scenario of closed institutional forges and how you might offer different functionality?
Yes.
Or so how does that play out in the new feature?
Excellent question. It is a not yet answer. We have thought it out for the long-term vision of Software Heritage, where we want to also cater for closed repositories and forges where maybe repositories that or deposits that have embargo dates where maybe in the future it will be open, but for now we need to keep it closed. It is in the more long-term roadmap, but for now we don't have functionalities that allow us to keep the closed code separately from the open one. And since not everybody knows that, so I will say it for the record. Software heritage is Merkle DAG, so it's a very large graph, deduplicating anything that's showing twice. So it's actually very intertwined. And if you have, for example, one license file that's appearing in thousands of repositories, we will keep it just once, and there will be links to this file from all of these different repositories. So we actually technically, we would need a separate infrastructure for the closed software and proprietary software, and this is not yet in our archive. I see, Andrew, you have also a question or a comment to share with us.
Yeah, just following up on Tom's question. This maybe
Yes.
reflects my lack of understanding. So the dialogue that we see on the screen talks about saving a forge, but that looks like that reads to me like a one-time ingest, and I infer from the discussion that's not the case, that any new repositories that get added after this point will automatically be connected to Software Heritage. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct in the sense of we are now listing the forge that was requested. So, for example, if I go to the browse request, let's see what we see. So, example, well, we have a lot of pending ones, but let's see if there's one not pending, because there's a manual curation when it comes to. There's a lot of pending. Okay. I think I will do that one because actually there's a lot of different steps when it comes to this functionality. And we have here, for example, a forge type, which is a GitLab forge type. We have the status that the first origin is loaded. It means that this now forge is added to our listing mechanism and will be continuously listed and loaded, which are the two tasks that we have at Software Heritage. First, we list all the URLs that are on this forge, and then after saying that we have a list, not a complete list, because every day you have new repositories, then there's the loader that comes and gets from those repositories the content. And after a forge is added to this pool of forges that we archive regularly, you can then see here, normally it will be added as one of these. If we go to the GitLab one, you can see that there's many instances that were added, and that they will be continuously archived. Yes.
Okay, and so how often does the loader go and revisit those forges?
This is so it's not as efficient as you would like, because you would like it to be quite close to the regular updates of these repositories. And this is why we have the save code now, when you want to kind of say, hey, this repository, you do want it to be updated as quickly as possible. And this is this queue of the save code now of one repository. The loading might take a lot of time in terms of we do have, for example, for GitHub, a lag of a few months of GitHub.
Okay.
So it's a continuous improvement of, yes. Thank you, Andrew, for the question, and Tom as well. Any other questions or comments on this on Software Heritage? So here I haven't shown you this first page where we can see how we progress. So I think that's from the first session, we did progress a little bit, but we didn't cross over the 300 million projects line. And maybe next week we will have that line crossed. let's keep the champagne on cold for this. Okay, I think that's a lot of time to show software heritage. So I'm going to go back to the presentation, unless you have questions on software heritage that I haven't answered. I see some writing in the chat, but I'm not going to follow up unless you want to unmute. Okay. So I'm going to move
Software
to
heritage.
Lars's presentation. So Lars Holm Nielsen from CERN, he's head of open science repositories, and he was here on the first session, and I'm going to show actually the first session part where he shows the in-venue AirDM connection to software heritage. So let's do
ask
that.
well, and take a breath. And then I'm going to ask Lars to share his screen, and maybe we'll do Q&A at the end. Yes, that will be perfect. Yes, go ahead, Lars.
Yeah, thank you, Maureen. So let's get control of my windows here. 2 seconds. Okay, so what I'm showing now is the integration we have done with software heritage on InVenue RDM and Zenodo. So InVenue RDM is the underlying repository software that we use in Zenodo, and that means that this software integration will be available for everybody who have an InVenue RDM instance running. So what I'm showing you now is the sandbox instance of Zenodo. So this is not something that's yet live on the main production instance of Zenodo, okay? But it will be hopefully during the summer, okay? And I've here prepared a little bit in advance a deposit. So, but if you go on Zenodo and know Zenodo already, you can click up here in the corner and start a new upload. And this is really for the use cases where you have some software that is sitting on your local disk. So if it's already on GitHub, and you want it in software heritage, then it's likely already harvested by software heritage, right? But there's these cases where, you know, small scripts that have been developed locally where there's no Git repository and things like that, and you want to share it, then you have the possibility to upload it on a repository. In this case, it's the Zenodo I'm using, right? So I have my software here, I've uploaded the file. Then you can associate all the usual metadata for the repository. So that you say it's a software type, I can give it a title, I can add who are the creators of this software. And when you have a creator, you can connect it with of course, with the ORCIDs and the affiliations with RAWs. So you have this way of describing a research output with the descriptive metadata. So then what is being added now, so that's already on Zenodo today, what's being added, oh, sorry, I'm forgetting the license here. So you can also add the license, and this is, of course, it's based on SPDX license library. So you have the usual suspects here, but in case you want other types of licenses for your software, then we have the full SPDX vocabulary integrated. Then you can add other metadata like funding sources, all the other stuff. But the interesting part is a little bit further down, we have software here. So now you can add your repository link. You can add what is the programming language. There's some development status. So these are new fields that are coming for software. And then once you've done that and you hit publish, okay, then this thing goes online. And initially you won't see anything here. And so it usually takes a little bit of time. So I'm using a different record now that already was ingested. But what happens in the background is that it already is being sent to software heritage. You will get a link here that says this has been archived in software heritage. You get the suite that Maureen was talking about before, and you can click the link here and you'll be able to browse the software source code as it was integrated in software heritage. So right now it's on the Zenodo sandbox and you can test these things out. Just be aware that there's a 1 megabyte limit because we are integrating with the staging environment right now. There won't be this limit in production, but it's a staging environment. So then once once the thing is online, so first we are able to couple the suite together with the DOI and get the DOI registered with this information. We also have that when you want to export this, for instance, to BibTeX or in the CodeMeta format, let me just share a new screen here. Then you have that our BibTeX include a new software type for the BibLaTeX. Also, the CodeMeta, we're able to export the CodeMeta here, and we're identifying it with the DOI. Here in the actual, right now, there's still some rough corners around the edges, and there's, for instance, missing the SWID ID link here inside the metadata, okay? But this is essentially the integration that makes sure that we can also get software source code that is sitting in small, I mean, either you can submit it there, but you can get your scripts and so forth into Software Heritage. And we can link the Software Heritage IDs with the DOIs. Okay, thank you. Then I'll hand it back.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. That was great. And thank you for the last minute save here with this demo.
Okay. Yes. So that was Invenio RDM. I'm looking at the time and asking myself if you want to comment or question it before we move forward, because it's kind of interesting to see that this is happening.
I have questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's go back to you.
Sorry. And of all the, like basically in the Australian context, we recommend using Software Heritage or we recommend using Zenodo. And so seeing linkages between them just makes this all the more beautiful. Whereas the other infrastructures that you mentioned are less frequently used in an Australian context. So all my questions are about this, basically.
Excellent. So let's go.
So I'm wondering how. So deposits as Zenodo are not typically capturing the full edit history, the version controlled version of the development of the software. It's a snapshot, a moment in time. I'm wondering lots of things about how that mapping is handled between Software Heritage and Zenodo. First of all, like, what would happen in the scenario where someone snapshots their code on GitHub and then they have a moment in time record on Zenodo? Does it get linked back to that point in time in the ingest from, say, GitHub? Or is it represented in Software Heritage as a separate record that is sort of divorced from its edit history?
Well, that's a very good question, because it's exactly this type of question I'm questioning when I'm testing and reviewing the development work that's done between the different infrastructures. And we do want to have the same capabilities that we have already integrated with HAL, for example, where someone can come and say, hey, the SWID, that's the SWID that is in Software Heritage, which is linked to all its development history. And this is the metadata record that I want to create on this scholarly repository, Zenodo, so that it's linked to the actual point in time in the repository, the live repository, which was on the Forge. And I see that maybe Forge is a word that's not very used in Australia, but let's say in GitHub, there was in GitHub this repository, and we want everything to stay linked. And this is one of the features that will be developed, not developed yet, because what Lars has shown was the actual zip deposited on the platform that will be then transferred to Software Heritage. And it is, if we had already the content in Software Heritage, we will not duplicate it. So it will be, which will have the same SWID, because the calculation of the hash will be the same hash. But the record, if we go back to how Software Heritage looks like, the record will have another URL because it will be the DOI URL and it won't be the GitHub URL. These are very interesting questions, how that looks like and how that feels like. And I think that we are, there's a lot of refinement and scrubbing the edges work to be done, not just for this project, but in the coming years, how to smooth things between infrastructure. So we do have this larger ecosystem which is truly connected. It's a first step. So it's a good question, Tom, and I do appreciate you asking it. Thank you. Yes, Dan.
Yeah, I guess partly just following up on your comment and also having seen the whole set of demos before, so this may be a little bit unfair to ask at this point rather than waiting until we get through all of them. But I guess I think when I looked at this originally, I'm a little bit unsure about, is this a infrastructure that is centered on specific tools? And specifically, is software heritage kind of the center that everything else is linking to in some ways? Or is this more a set of APIs that could be used with lots of different tools, and these tools are just the ones that are being developed and used now? And I guess kind of the third piece, which is a little bit of the, maybe it's a little bit of the first one as well, is there a center to this? Is there like an architecture diagram that kind of shows how all these things fit together?
That's a good idea to do a diagram, how all this fits together. We have sequence diagrams that are found on the SEERS report showing how this may fit together between different infrastructure and software heritage. The idea is, the kind of vision is to have all source code centralized and saved in software heritage and mirrored in different mirrors. So if something happens to software heritage or in France, or you don't know what may happen. So we have this archiving system that caters infrastructures, research infrastructures. So even if Zenodo keeps a copy, having it also in software heritage or getting the suite from software heritage kind of helps making sure that the software is kept in its original form, because the development history, it's the way that we should save software, not just the point in time. And this zip it feels unnatural. How did it get to a zip? I did download it from somewhere, or did I just locally created all my software and nobody saw it before? So yes, there is some things to clarify, and an architecture diagram showing how these components work together in the puzzle. How to construct this puzzle is quite interesting to have.
Right. I mean, so just to follow up on one slight piece of that, sorry, Tom, I guess the question is, you're doing this from software heritage, but it's again kind of unclear to me. Is software heritage the center of this architecture diagram, or is it that there's an archival capability in which software heritage happens to be the one thing that does that now, but there could be others in the future? Or do any of these other infrastructures have the capability now of working with each other, or is everything working through software heritage? So again, I'm kind of trying to think about, is this an architecture for the research software landscape, or in some ways, and again, I don't mean this in a bad way, but is this an architecture that is serving software heritage and making it kind of more essential for everything?
Well, Dan, I am with a software heritage t-shirt, so it will be hard for me not to say like, yes, you should use software heritage, and I'm here to tell you that. But I do think, and genuinely I think, that software heritage solves a problem that wasn't solved before, and gives a way for all these infrastructure to use an an existing now and long-term vision infrastructure that will help them, but not only research software, also other software that's in this space. And we should not forget that even if we do cater research software in some of the infrastructure, that they might depend, and might very large might they usually depend on software that's elsewhere. And if, for example, a research team depends on many artifacts that are not research software, how do they archive them? Do they do it in Zenodo? No, they don't. They just hope that GitHub will stay forever, but GitHub might not stay forever. So having software heritage is making sure that all software is safely somewhere for the future, for its sustainability and reusability. And now for the architecture of the scholarly ecosystem, some of these infrastructure interacts between themselves, but having the same language, the same metadata properties, the same vocabulary, which is not a software heritage vocabulary, even though we do contribute a lot to CodeMeta. Having the SWID, which is a standardized now, in the future, the very short future, maybe ISO standard identifier, agreeing on this would help infrastructure communicate with it in this ecosystem. I don't think that's being dependent on solely software heritage. Also to say that the SWID is locally calculated. You don't need software heritage to have a SWID. You can do it on your machine. So each infrastructure could generate a SWID internally. They don't need software heritage to resolve or to create SWID for them. It's not a registry of identifiers.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning to say anything against software heritage. I think software heritage does a lot of great stuff. It's just that I can imagine other scenarios or other kind of use cases where the functionality that software heritage provides isn't the essential one for the use case, and maybe a couple of the other infrastructures do provide that functionality. And so again, I'm just kind of trying to think about how all these things fit together and in some ways, what the message is to the research software community overall. So.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your question. I think it's a very important question because some people won't dare ask, and I think it's very important to clarify all of these elements. Yes, thank you, Dan. I see, Tom, you have your hand raised for a bit of time. Go ahead, Tom.
I was thinking something similar, but perhaps coming at it from a different angle. In my mind, I had always seen software heritage as the right place to capture the history of development of software that's developed openly. And that overlaps with research software significantly because a very large chunk of research software is developed openly. I think what's really interesting about tackling this use case is that you've created a pathway for ingestion that doesn't capture development history in the same way that would have been the conventional point of entry. And in doing so, I would say that you're broadening the purpose of software heritage within the landscape. And it kind of changes the nature or the place of software heritage in the landscape as well, because I often would have said to people, use Zenodo if you want to publish a release of a piece of software, and in particular, if there's no development history of the software, if you just want to get a DOI so that you can essentially participate in a regular scholarly practice. Well, not a regular, sorry, that's not the right phrase, but hopefully emerging regular practice of citing an identifier to locate the source of the code that you used for your paper. Then use Zenodo in the situation where there's no development history, but ideally actually do use software heritage because there's no ingestion step. It's probably already harvested, and that's a lower friction way of going and citing a specific moment in time in the development of the software relative to the paper, and better practice overall. But I think what's really interesting about what you've cracked open here is that I assume with software heritage that I could, it's precisely the use case where the researcher has created the code on their desktop. They may or may not have used a version control system, but they essentially only willing to make a moment in time version of the software available. And they might do that because they're embarrassed by the earlier stages, or it's just that they didn't capture it. And one could pretend to have developed that software in a version control system, say upload it to GitHub, and then it would be possible under previous versions of software heritage to just ingest the publicly available version, and it would have captured, if you like, a false version of the development history of the software. It would have been a later date, for instance, than when it was written, perhaps, or it would have implied that it was all written in one go. But I wouldn't have advised people to do that, right? That's additional steps. I would have said, like, you can go straight to Zenodo, because that meets that use case, basically. And I think it's interesting because it kind of, it alters the scope of software heritage such that if I was going and looking at software development practices, there would be this moment in time now where there's all these one-shot developments happening, and it's kind of not, it's not the same as what you've been holding in software heritage to date. So to me, it's an interesting inflection point, in the same way that if you were to ever take on closed software, that would be an inflection point on the purpose of the archive. Yeah, I too wonder how this alters its position in the landscape, if you like, because of that. That was more of a comment than a question.
I see that, but I appreciate the comment. Yeah. I would like to answer the comment, because this use case actually is something that we are working on with HAL since 2017, and in the HAL, which is the French National Archive. So I do understand that many people don't know this archive, but maybe the presentation just after we will see what's happening there. So in HAL, this was available in 2018. The fact that you could deposit a zip file of a version, and this was just one version without the development history. And since I think 2021, even 2020, we have released a possibility to tag a suite. So you had it saved, a development history, all the development history in software heritage. You picked a suite, and then you came and dropped it in HAL. And maybe I'll move to the demo. So instead of just describing that, I'm going to let me see.
Hi everybody, my name is Maud Medves, and I'm working for INRIA, which is the French Research Institute in Computer Science. I'm here today to introduce you to two infrastructures for research software, namely HAL and EpiSciences. HAL is the National Scholarly Repository in France, hosting the vast majority of French publications. It is multidisciplinary, and most universities and research performing organizations do have a portal on HAL. EpiSciences, on the other hand, is a publishing platform hosting overlay journals in Diamond Open Access. So at this point, I believe that we need to define very briefly some vocabulary terms. First one is Diamond Open Access. I believe everybody is familiar with it, but just as a reminder, that's an open access model in which a journal publish articles with no fees to either a reader or author. So it means that there are no subscription fees and no APCs, so article processing charges. The second term, overlay journal, that's a journal whose articles are located in a scholarly repository, meaning that a preprint has to be first deposited in a scholarly repository before submission to the journal. In our case, AP Sciences provides to its journals a peer reviewing environment, but it does not host the papers themselves. The preprint, the published version, and possibly all versions in between are located either on HAL or on arXiv. Now that we all speak the same language, I will start with a brief demo of HAL. As I told you, HAL is a scholarly repository, and as such, it does host mainly articles, conference papers, technical reports, and so on. But since 2018, it is also possible to deposit source code. HAL offers a service which is complementary to Software Heritage. So while the source code itself is archived on Software Heritage, it can be described with rich metadata on HAL, which makes it citable. So if I'm one of the authors of a software, I can submit it to HAL and describe it in details. So I am connected, I click the upload button. I can choose what kind of research output I want to deposit. So in my case, that's software. And here you see I have two options. Either my code has been developed on a Git repo, and that's a platform that has been already crawled by Software Heritage, meaning that the source code is already archived. It has a SWID, software hash identifier. I can enter it here and search for associated metadata, or my code has been developed on a personal website, my computer, wherever, and I can upload the source code as a zip here. Once I've done that, you'll see that I can add metadata that's very similar to Lars what Lars has shown you in the previous presentation. So I can add authors with affiliations, the name of the software, domain, a description in several languages if needed. I can add keywords, software license, the programming language, the version of the software, etc. And when I'm done, I just check what I've filled in and I submit. So I'm gonna show you here SPARQL microservices, which is a real entry in the real world. And you can see if I click on the complete list of metadata that the author who is Franck Michel has indicated, so I filled in an abstract, his name with its affiliation, the version, the development status, if it's still active or not, programming language, the keywords, and the software hash identifier. And that is helpful because here at the top of the page, you can also have a look, if I click here, directly to the source code on Software Heritage. It is important to underline that it is a moderated workflow. So once your code is submitted to HAL, it won't go online immediately. It will be first reviewed by curators who will make suggestions to enrich metadata if this is needed. And that's how the quality of the data is ensured. So as I told you, this functionality has existed in HAL for a few years. What was developed in the context of the FAIRCORE for EOSC project is a similar functionality on AP Sciences. So an author submitting a paper to a journal can now submit software as additional material. And that software can be assessed also by the reviewers assessing the paper. And that's what I will now show you. So I am on the sandbox of AP Sciences, but this is already that already exists in production. So I'm just using the sandbox not to create problems, but journals running on AP Sciences do have the functionality. So as an author, I start the submission process of my preprint by entering the ID of my manuscript. So I will enter it here. So that's that's the article I want to submit. I will submit it in the test section. I could add a comment or a cover letter. I guarantee that I'm one of the article authors, and I can submit here. Okay, so now that I've done that, I can go to find the article I just submitted. And here you see that I can now add a software to my submission. So if I go to the same software I was on previously, I will copy identifier, and here in my article, I will add that software. So now with my paper submission, I also have a software attached. Now I'm gonna connect, and that's my other window. I will connect as a reviewer to the journal, and that I've received a paper reviewing invitation. You can see that here. So there's the paper, that's another one, plus the software attached to it. I will agree to review this article. Now it's in my, it should be in my reviewing. Reviewing in progress. No, all my reviewings. Okay, that's here. I click on it. And so as you see, I'm gonna hide that and that. Basically, that's my my reviewing form with all the sections I have to all the aspects of the papers I have to assess. And in that same reviewing interface, I do have access to the code as it is on Software Heritage. So the iframe allows me to stay in the same web page. I don't have to click enter Software Heritage in another tab, etc. I just have everything. I can navigate. I'm clicking. I can navigate the code without leaving my reviewing form, and that's one of the main advantages of this new functionality. I'm now gonna show you what it looks like in real world again. So that's GTC-AM, that's a journal in mechanics that's running on Episciences. And if you have a look at the latest articles, I will show you this one. So that's the public interface. If you go to that URL, you will see exactly the same articles as me. I click on crack branching, and here as a reader, I can have a look at the metadata of the publications, and again, I have access to that exact same iframe I was showing you earlier. That means that if software is attached to the publication, I will be able to navigate it directly on the article landing page. So I believe that's a major advantage, because that's what it looks like when you access published articles as a reader. There's no well-hidden supplementary material sections, no data availability statement hidden software somewhere. It's everything is on the same page, and it's very visible. So that's what I wanted to show you for today. Thank you for your attention.
I had a question from Dan. How should we use our 16 minutes left? I think that the other demo is quite short, so I'm going to just run it, and we will end maybe the session with discussing the FAIR for Research Software principles, next steps, because this is your part, Dan, and not do the activity because we don't have time for the activity, but it was a very interesting conversation. So I do appreciate having this conversation. We don't really need the activity because we already have all these amazing ideas in our minds and questions that can stretch the conversation. So let me just.
Okay. I mean, I wasn't really suggesting that because I wanted
everybody.
to.
My name is Maud-Medvez.
I don't particularly care if we do that part or not. I just was thinking I wasn't sure what we had time for and just wanted to think about it.
Yeah, I think that we don't have time for the activity, and we already had it in the first session. And it was quite. It's a better activity to do when there's a lot of people and we can't hear everyone. But now, since we are a small group discussing and kind of exchanging, it feels more interesting. So I'm going to show the demo because then you have all the three types of infrastructures in mind, and we can then finish with the next steps, and maybe you can tell us or tell me and the experts in the demos how to get this adopted. But I think that one of the key elements that I'm taking from this session, even though we didn't finish it yet, is something that you've said, Dan, about the architecture of the landscape and having some architecture diagram showing what connects to what. So the one that I showed with the EOSC Sears report is kind of a high level, very, it's a very good diagram for reports, but we want something more technical to show how the architecture is working. So before you comment that, because I know you have a lot of things to do, I'm going just to show the Esri Math demo from Maxence, and it's very.
I'm Maxence Sudrose, and I'm junior scientist at SVMAT. And today I'm about to talk about the work we carry out together with Software Heritage in the context of FAIRCore for EOSC. The FAIRCore for EOSC project intends to build components that can support FAIR EOSC, meaning that we want scholars to access and build findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable research entities. So today I'm about to speak about the work we carry out together concerning the research software. But first, what is SVMAT? SVMAT is a leading catalog for mathematical software. We collect metadata related to publication that you can find in ZBMath Open. We collect metadata that announce a new release or a new version of a software. So today I'm about to take the example of the SageMath software. The SageMath software is one of the most important software in the domain of mathematics. So for this software, we ensure that the source code will be in a safe place. We're using for that the Safe Code Now endpoint of the API of Software Heritage. So with this hyperlink, we can easily and seamlessly find the software source code that is archived on Software Heritage and the suite, the software hash identifier that is intrinsically computed on the source code. So every identifier you can have related to any piece of the software is unique and reliable. Also, with this URI, we can ensure and provide our user to access and find software and the source code in a safe place over time. Now I'm about to talk about the metadata we collect regarding the software. We collect, if we click on here, we can find a bunch of metadata we collect related to the version of the software, the license of the software, and also related software project, or also article that can detail the software, and the OS you need to use the software. So we collect a bunch of metadata that are very rich to understand the context of the software. This metadata will be deposited on the Software Heritage service, thanks to the Software Heritage deposit endpoint. And this metadata that are in JSON file can be downloaded and used to find information that can help with citing the software and provide scholars with credit. Okay, many thanks for having watched this video, and I look forward to receive your question. I'm Maxence Sudrose.
Okay, so the next slide is about something completely different, how we are building bridges between infrastructure, but this can be also a relevant information for this landscaping question, because we are on another project called Software, where we're trying to establish a machine assistant workflow where mentions of software are identified and then sent to the author to validation, so that links between software in the real world are available on the scholarly repositories, the OA, the open access repository. So trying to identify, describe, register and link software. This project software started just now in January 2024. It's a KIST-ERA funded project. And the last one about all this infrastructure and also helpful for this landscaping is the SciCodes Consortium, which actually started through the FORCE-11 Software Citation Implementation Working Group, thanks to Alice Allen, who didn't join us today, but I hope she will. We are still continuing. We have now 37 resources, registries, and repositories who meet every month discussing these important topics on best practices for infrastructures that cater software and some code meta updates. And now that we are the activity, and since we don't have time to do an activity, and I see a lot of chatter in the chat about maybe we should get your comments and questions and discussion points online, even though we have 7 minutes to discuss all the things that we need to discuss. So who wants to say things and discuss?
I mean, I'll just say that I don't think, I think most of the comments that are in the chat are not immediately relevant to the slides. I think they're kind of a little bit of side conversations.
Yes, I know some of them are side conversations, some of the questions about SW Math and Marty. So yes, there's SW Math and ZB Math are FIS Karlsruhe development, and I don't have a lot of information about the NFDI involvement, but I do know there's a lot of connections there as well. I don't know if one of you is coming to the IOSC symposium in October, but there's going to be a session with the NFDI on software, and I see that we do want to have some events maybe in Australia in 2025, so I need to put it in my calendar. I don't have the dates of this International Data Week, but it's quite far, Australia, right?
Andrew is contractually obliged to invite us all to attend the IDW in, the joint CoData and Research Data Alliance plenary in-person meeting
And
in
WDS.
Brisbane. And WDS meeting in
And
October in
RDC.
2025.
Yep.
What a great excuse to travel all the way to the end of the world and soak up one of the warmer parts of Australia.
I think Perth is
before
more
it gets
the
too
end.
warm, fortunately.
Yeah. If it were Perth, that would
Yes.
really be the end of the world, but Brisbane is only just partway there.
Right, and for Moran, this will be the RDA meeting as well. That'll be in a year and a half, so you might be going for that anyhow.
Well, I was wondering if I should, because it's quite far and it takes a lot of time to get there. But if you're planning a co-located event on software, why not?
Just think,
Moran,
Moran, every time I go to something in Europe, I have to travel that distance.
Yes. That was precisely the point I was going to make. We know it's a long way, believe me.
Yeah, it's the default for us is to travel that far to get to almost everywhere. So, yeah.
Yep.
Pretty well
anywhere I want to go is 24 hours.
That's I know that it's a real pain for you to get to us to here, but if I have a very good reason to come to International Data Week, which might be, or we might have a very good reason for me to do this travel, I would be very keen to do it. So let's see what unveils the future, and I'll make plans with that.
I mean, it's a way off.
The other part of this as well is that we're going to be having this third research funders meeting in Sweden in September, and so the Australia would happen to be about a year later, and if we were going to have a fourth, it would kind of line up nicely in time potentially.
Yeah, agreed.
There's also going to be that eVerse workshop that'll be in the one right before the meeting in Sweden, and so potentially maybe there could be an eVerse workshop as well for all we know.
Very interesting perspective there. So let's keep it in the calendar. We are not going to do the activity because we have 3 minutes left. I'm going to pass to, well, I think that Dan, for 3 minutes, you can maybe discuss, well, I'm going too far, right? The next steps, right? Where is it? The next steps. It's here. Sorry.
I've changed the order around a little bit. So sorry, now I don't even know which slide is which with you driving. So but in any case, that's okay. So when Fair for Research Software ended, as you probably everybody here knows already, but maybe if there's people watching who don't know, we looked at where we were and we looked at what had happened with the FAIR principles, and realized that one of the failings of the FAIR principles, in addition to the fact that they were focused just on data, was the fact that they didn't actually have any governance. And so if you want to ask a question about the FAIR principles, you have to kind of track down an author, or maybe now you can go try to find somebody in GoFair who has a different version of the principles sometimes. So we wanted to kind of have a formal handoff. And what we chose was the fact that we had done all this very generally. We wanted to make sure that we were kind of staying general in terms of management, and handed the work from the working group over to this RDA software source code interest group. And we said that we weren't going to do anything for 2 years after that version 1 came out, and 2 years happens to have passed a couple of months ago. And so we're now starting to think about this activity that we wanted to do 2 years ago in 2 years, which is now, which is to have a pretty broad review and consultation conducted by RISA, which I'm going to be leading, and Tom and Moran and about 3 or 4 other people will also be co-leading. And the idea is to try to go out as widely as possible, talk about where things are, get inputs about what's been confusing, what's worked well, what do we need to redefine, maybe do we need to change something, and also use this a little bit to help in terms of groups that are still thinking about FAIR but haven't thought about FAIR for Research Software, or groups that are thinking about FAIR for Research Software but aren't quite sure what to do, to use this a little bit as another push for adoption as well. And I think, I'm not sure what the next slide is. Right, okay, yeah, so the next slide is actually on that adoption side, that we have been doing a number of different things. There's different groups that have been doing different work. So one activity is that RISA has published a blog post a couple of months ago that was a bunch of different adoption examples and what's happened. And there then are other people that have done things as well. And this FAIR BioRS guidelines is one of those, looking at specifically how to take the FAIR research software principles and apply them specifically to biomedical research. So, so not just principles, but also a little bit more guidance. And if you have any thing that you've done that we don't know about yet, that hasn't been publicized, you can let any of us know that are on the FAIR for RS author list, or Moran or Julia as co-chairs of this group that's hosting things now. And then the last piece of this is that adopting FAIR is great, but it's not really the end. Open science is more than just FAIR. In some ways, you could say that FAIR isn't enough. And we can think about a bunch of different levels of fairness and a bunch of different levels of advancing. And so we can, as shown in the slide that's in the paper about FAIR for RS, we can think about the fact that we can have identifiers, we can have metadata, those can be FAIR. The software itself doesn't have to be available to be FAIR, but we'd like it to be available, and that kind of takes us into that fourth point. Whether or not the source code is available is another piece, and we can imagine some kind of last piece where the software is actually not only FAIR but is also open source and is reproducible and has lots of other good stuff. And I'll just say that there also are lots of other things that aren't even on this about kind of quality, robustness, and a bunch of other things. So I think the main message here is that FAIR is a kind of a minimal step along the way. And doing these minimum steps is already as hard. And once we do this, then we can start going even further and get to an even happier place, I think. That might be the end.
Yeah, we are at the end, but I'm not going to share the, we had the form for the first session, but I think we had plenty during the session, and even without the activity and without the form, I think that we can close at this as a very nice and cozy session. And I want to thank you everyone here participating. I'm going to stop the sharing and the recording if I succeed on that. My screen is moving. At 2 in the morning, I can't do anything. Okay, so I stopped that. Now, how do I stop the recording? I can't stop the recording, right? The recording will continue.
You actually,
Yes.